Good evening. My name is Kate Dobbs, and today I'll be presenting the research topic of guilt in the Leopold and Loeb case and comparing that to a greater whole of how does guilt affect an individual and especially a criminal, and how likely is a homicide to occur from that. So my pronouns are she, her, hers, and in order to assist in my explanation of this theory, I'm going to be referring to the case study of Leopold and Loeb, which has gone down in history to be the crime of the century in the 20th century. A heavy weight of a crime on the perpetrator's shoulders is sometimes so immense that it produces a confession. However, in other times, there are individuals who feel no remorse of their actions at all. To what extent is remorse influential enough to result in this confession? This is an overarching question that contains several smaller pieces, the mental health of criminals being a factor whilst considering the concept of remorse and guilt. One of the most renowned murders deemed the crime of the century is the Leopold and Loeb case. Two wealthy young men of Jewish heritage, Nathan Leopold Jr. and Richard Loeb, commit a gruesome and heinous crime simply for the thrill of the perfect crime. They were very wealthy. The two men attended the University of Chicago, grew up in a very privileged life, and never really faced any animosity of any sort. They were kind of gliding by through life. They committed the so-called perfect crime after much planning on May 19, 1924. They believed that they would be able to commit the crime and escape unscathed. As time progressed, they became engulfed by their guilt. Well, that's what typically everyone would think, right? However, their sloppy execution was a result of their overconfidence in the event, and it becomes clear that Leopold and Loeb cope with guilt very differently, in a sense that they rarely acknowledge it at all and rarely have that emotion themselves. And many different experiments, investigations that were held prove that these individuals did not experience guilt. And how does that compare to the likeliness of committing a homicide or committing another crime and the influence of those factors? So questions I'm overall going to investigate are: what causes these men to feel this lack of remorse? And is this a common occurrence, or is this just an occurrence that happened in a special case? What percentage of individuals with mental illness do commit crimes? And to what extent are they homicides? Arguably one of the most gruesome and heinous crimes of them all. Also, we're going to talk about their privileged lifestyles and their past. So as they were children, do they still experience this guilt? Did something shift in their lives that caused them to maybe abandon that feeling? So we're going to investigate that as well. So perhaps their privileged lifestyles and past petty crimes led them into a false sense of security and believing they could elude authority. Perhaps their privilege and money could get them out of anything. Maybe that was another factor. Also, Leopold and Loeb, their murder case provides us with an untimely explanation as to the power or lack of power remorse has and its effects on individuals and how different that can be. So, to begin, guilt was never present in the minds of Leopold and Loeb. From an early age, they never experienced it. For both men, this murder was not their first crime. They had been known for petty theft, larger versions of theft. They were known for either stealing cars or things from stores, and they got a thrill out of that. Two of them crossed paths, and they just absolutely, it was the adrenaline, the thrill, and they never really were caught, never faced any true repercussions. So guilt was never really an influential motive for Leopold, especially. A quote reads, "At an early age, the psychiatrist indicated that he stole money from the boy next door, hiding it under the roof of a playhouse in his backyard. He had absolutely no compunction of guilt or fear connected with the theft." And that is from page 147 of Higdon. It is seen from a young age that Loeb and its conscience isn't quite there and isn't present at all. And it was not functioning as strongly as a cognitively typical person. So this is very similar for Leopold as well. Guilt, never a super prominent thing. Even from a young age, these crimes are what drove him. He never felt guilt, but he felt adrenaline and a positive reaction to these crimes, opposed to a typical individual when committing a crime would feel a negative guilt or negative experience. So again, Leopold and Loeb, from a young age, never experienced any sort of guilt toward committing crimes. To continue, we touched on the mental health aspect. Before diving into this project, I wasn't entirely sure what the mental health state of these individuals were. I assumed that it could not have been they could not have been cognitively typical in order to commit a crime simply, especially homicide, for the thrill of it. Well, the mental health state of an individual can influence their ability to feel guilt. And Leopold and Loeb do possess mental health issues. After several psychiatric exams, they were performed on Leopold and Loeb after they were convicted of the murder. Different doctors and psychiatrists wanted to see, why did they do the thing that they did? They claim it was just for a perfect crime, but what chemically caused them to want to do this? A study conducted by the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease in July of 1926 claims, after 46 pages devoted to cursory review of the Catalonia problem, the author gives a newspaper potpourri of details in the importance of medico-legal case. He concludes that both patients had catatonia, and this is from the Disease Journal of Nervous and Mental Health, the Journal of Nervous and Mental Health Disease, page 101. Catatonia is also another term for schizophrenia. So this disturbed and schizophrenic state is sure to distort the typical emotions of an individual. Therefore, remorse was not an emotion that these two could even comprehend or feel like most people, something that they never experienced. And with their mental health state, they were unable to experience the anxieties and remorse that come with the gruesome act of murdering an individual. This stands true with other individuals with mental health issues. So, quote, research has long established an association between homicide and severe mental illness. A study by Hoggins, 2001, revealed 15% of murderers show severe mental disorder. Indeed, several studies investigating the link between homicide and severe mental illness have found elevated rates of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression among individuals convicted of homicide. So those individuals who do have those sorts of emotions and mental disorders cannot physically comprehend the emotion of remorse. So Leopold and Loeb are just an example of this. The fact that 15%, that is a chunk of individuals with severe mental health disorders of all homicides in this study, do have these mental health disorders, that could provide us with as an example or as a response to why these individuals are committing these crimes and feeling nothing in return. No sense of guilt, no sense of remorse. And it can be from a deeper psychological aspect. So those are very important points. So remorse can play a critical role in terms of an individual who committed the crime. However, some individuals, such as Leopold and Loeb, lack this ability to feel any emotion of that sense of remorse. Leopold and Loeb had a very lavish lifestyle and privileged. They did not, as a young age, they never really experienced that feeling of remorse. They also did not possess the typical emotion of remorse because of their cognitive state. They both simply just were unable to comprehend that emotion, and that resulted in a negative outcome of that. And it made them quite dangerous to reality and ended up resulting in the murder of an individual. Never in their lives have they experienced remorse. So unfortunately, it seems as though they were almost doomed from the get-go. But hopefully with this information moving forward, this research gone into the result of connection to mental health from childhood experience to potentially resulting in a homicide, maybe we can compare these concepts and find a way to prevent the amount of homicides occurring in the mental health community and provide those communities with the resources that they need to set them on a better track than on a negative one that results in such a negative outcome.